handle.
You want answers!
I want the truth!
You can't handle the truth!
Wow.
That's not
Wow.
a real statement. Yeah.
Wow.
Shuck says, yeah. JP says, yeah. Shuck says,
Jesus.
but, I mean...
Now, we're not going to harp on that.
What? The fact that the detective told him he was right?
Yeah. That's terrible, boy. This is deep. Go ahead, man. Go ahead.
All right, so after JP, the detective, confirms to Stephen Shuck that, yeah, that's right. Shuck says, yeah. JP, detective, says, yeah. Shuck says, but, but that's also something, JP, the detective, completes the statement. That's not unusual. Shuck says, that's not unusual. JP, the detective, says, correct.
Wow.
Shuck says, when you work in the tower, guests do it all the time. The detective says, so you continue walking down and you still couldn't hear anything at that point. At that point in time, right? At that point.
Again, he's asking a leading question.
Right. So Shuck says,
he's telling him all these statements, even Hodson.
Right.
Everything has been leading statements, telling them what they did here.
Right. Isn't that correct?
Isn't that correct?
You continue walking down and you couldn't hear anything at that point.
Yes. In a transcribed statement, you cannot see somebody going like this. Okay? You can't see it. You can just picture all these leading questions.
Sure.
It's disturbing, man.
So the detective says, so you continued walking down and you still couldn't hear anything at that point.
No, I couldn't.
I mean, literally with the sworn statements like this, when it's recorded, you can't hear the inflection of the voices either. So,
exactly.
So Shuck says, no.
He agreed.
The detective says, so you get to, okay, you described 2 or 3 doors.
Yes.
And behind blank, Jesus. So Jesus is 2 or 3 doors ahead of you.
Yes.
Shuck says, yes.
I would say that too.
Mm-hmm.
This is brutal.
So the detective says, so I know this hallway really well by this point. Well, that's interesting because you just asked him like 15 minutes worth of questions about the 200 hallway service elevator. Okay, but anyway.
Yeah.
So I know this hallway really well at this point. And so when you describe 2 or 3 doors, do you mean 2 or 3 sections? Because I know that the 2 doors are together, and I would describe that as one room, and that's a section. Is that correct?
And that the officer said that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Shuck says, yeah.
Yes.
Detective says,
oh, God.
If
you can't make this up.
Oh, you can't. You literally can't make this up. It makes me sick to go through this, but
yeah.
But anyway,
I couldn't make it up.
So
it'd be horrible.
If we made it up, nobody would ever do anything with it.
It would be a comedy. It'd be like Leslie Nielsen doing an airplane or something. It would be, it'd be a comedy with O.J. Simpson and Leslie Nielsen. Going like this. Yes. Yeah. Okay. Yes, O.J. Yeah. Okay. Go ahead.
Okay, so the detective, and this is kind of, I'm going to read it verbatim, but I can't make much head or tails out of it. But the detective says, if that because there's a little like, and Shuck says, yeah, there. Detective says, little. Shuck says, back to back. The detective says, back to back, and there's a little wall comes out. They're talking about the alcoves, the little area.
All right.
Shuck says, yes. Detective says, and it's almost like a little cubby hole type. Shuck says, yes. Detective says, leading to the door. Shuck says, exactly. So when you describe that, he's 2 to 3 doors up. Shuck says he was, I think 2, I would say, cubby pairs of doors ahead of me. Detective says, pairs of doors. Okay, so sections. Yeah. That's what Shuck says. Whew. Okay, gotcha. JP, the detective says, makes perfect sense. Thanks for agreeing with me.
This is terrible. This
painful.
is horrible.
I mean, it's really painful, guys. I mean, it may be painful to listen to, but it is freaking painful to read through this stuff.
It's painful. It's painful for your brother to actually have to sit here while you're talking this crap.
It is horrible.
To me, you know what I'm saying?
Horrible. So anyway, he says, so the detective says, makes perfect sense. So do you remember, so as you're, and I'm reading this almost, trying to read it verbatim, so that's why
Right.
backed up. So he says, makes perfect sense. So do you remember then, so as you're walking up and he's 2 to 3 cubbies ahead of you, is that when he turns and yells at you? Or is that when you start to hear gunfire? Shuck says, that's when I start to hear gunfire about 5 feet before that. That's pretty specific. Detective says, okay. Shuck says, and I took like about 5 slow steps towards it. I was kind of in disbelief. I knew what it was, but JP, the detective, says, in that gunfire, if you remember, were those single shots, gunshots, or were those rapid gunshots? Shuck says, very rapid. What's interesting, remember,
Campos said rapid fire. Or
Campos actually said very rapidly.
Right.
Question. So you hear a loud drilling coming from 32-135. Could you tell if it was deep in the room or right by the doors? Good question.
Mm-hmm.
Campos says it was deep in the room. And it was pretty rapidly.
All right.
Terminology, man.
I'm telling you. So he says
terminology.
So Shuck says very rapid.
Phraseology.
JP, the detective.
Hold on a second. But Shuck didn't come up with that rapidly on his own.
I don't know.
The detective asked him if it was rapidly.
Detective says, were those single gunshots or were those rapid gunshots?
Right.
Now, if you're talking about guns, you either say rapid fire, maybe, but it's really auto fire. Is it single or is it auto?
Right. Single shot or auto. Yeah. Semi-auto or auto.
3-round burst, semi-auto, automatic, rifles, single shot, what is it?
Right.
Because that's the selector button on the damn rifle.
That's the selector button on all these things. It's single shot, semi, auto.
The detective is the one who said rapid.
Exactly.
Shuck confirms. Very rapid.
And that word rapid or rapidly has came up in Campos statements as well.
Absolutely. So the detective says very rapid. So Shuck says very rapid. Detective says very rapid.
Very rapid. Okay. God.
I know.
All right. Go ahead.
Shuck says that's what was so unusual about it. Detective says okay. Shuck says yeah. Detective says so you're about 5 feet from where you barricade. You're hearing rapid gunfire. Shuck says yes. Detective says, and at that point is when Jesus turns around and yells at you to take cover. Now, I don't know if he turned around or not, but he turned around, yells at you to take cover. Shuck says yes.
He's telling him what Jesus just did. Yeah. He's doing this.
Yep.
Yes.
Detective says, okay, so you're walking down down the wall towards 135. Jesus is to your left. And it's blacked out, but the first letter is J and the last letter is S, so I'm assuming it's Jesus. Jesus is to your left. Stephen Schuck says, no, he's to my right.
Okay.
The detective says, he's to your right. Shuck says, to my right, facing the double doors. Yes.
Okay.
JP, the detective says, got it. And you, so when, and he gets cut off, Shuck says, when I took cover.
What?
The detective
says what?
Got it. And you two, so when, and he gets cut off, Shuck says, when I took cover. JP says, he yells at you to take cover, and you go to the left. Shuck says, I took cover to the left. Detective says, so then you guys would be diagonal from each other. Shuck says, yes. JP, the detective, says approximately 2 or 3 cubbies. Shuck says, yes. Detective says across, or I mean behind or ahead. Shuck says, yes. Detective says, okay, so at that point, when you take cover, do you remember the room by chance? Shuck says, I do not. I didn't look at it. I don't even, JP says, completely understand. Shuck says, I want to take JP says, yeah. Shuck says, I don't want to take a guess and be wrong. Detective says, nope, completely understand. Then the gunfire ceases at that point after he yells at you to take cover. That's when you said it. It ceased from what you were hearing, and then it just starts coming down the hallway. Shuck says, yes. It ceased. Shuck says, yeah, it ceased. I think he waited for it to stop to come out and yell at me. This shit makes no sense. JP says, okay. Shuck says, it's so loud, you couldn't almost, you couldn't almost not even differentiate when he's shooting down the hallway and outside. Detective says, okay. Shuck says, and what I remember is the firing stopped. He popped out, which is Jesus, yelled at me to get cover. That's when I jumped to my left, and he was on the right side of the hallway. Shuck says, as you're looking at the double doors, JP detective says, and then from that point is where the rounds then start coming down the hallway. Shuck says, yes. Now, we're talking 2 or 3 volleys down the hallway. JP, the detective, says, are those single shots? You just ask him.
What? I don't get this, man.
So Shuck says, full auto.
So now he uses auto.
Detective says, full auto rapid? What What? Guess what Shuck says? Very
Yes.
rapid.
Very rapid.
You want answers! I want the truth! You can't handle the truth!